So you have to prepare your ESL students for the Cambridge exams. But how do you know which test is best for them? If you pick a test that's too low, they won't get the valuable qualification that they need. But if you aim too high, they've got a high chance of failure. It's a difficult decision, and it's one you need to get right early on. I'm Will from Enchanted ESL, and I've prepared hundreds of students for the Cambridge exams. This is the second video on my series explaining to other teachers how to do just that. We're going to look at all the different types of Cambridge exams, try to figure out which ones are best for your students, and then see what books and resources are available. First, let's look at this graphic. It contains all of the Cambridge English exams relative to the Common European Framework of Reference levels, from basic A1 and A2 levels through independent B1 and B2 up to proficient C1 and C2. So we're going to discount all of these ones on the right because they're specific exams that the majority of our students will never need to take. That leaves us with 4. We have a few Young Learners exams, 3 for school exams, 5 general exams, and 3 business ones. I'll admit, I don't really see much point in the Young Learners exams. They're for young children, as you'd expect, and for those with a lower level. Personally, I would never want to put any kids of that age and ability through an exam like this. It's needless stress and the qualification isn't worth that much at all. That said, the associated textbooks and resources are pretty good for building up to the higher exams later on. If you are required by your school to teach these exams, there's plenty of resources on the internet available for you to do so. I'm not going to be covering them because so few people do those exams and I don't have much experience in it. Next, let's look at the business exams. Again, these aren't super useful. They focus on English used in the workplace, so the writing tasks are emails to a colleague, and the speaking things are like simulating a meeting. Unless your student specifically needs the business qualification or just really wants to learn business English, I wouldn't bother with these at all. Instead, I'd go for one of the 2 main exam streams. The most important qualifications are here. Key, Preliminary and First, all with for schools equivalents, then Advanced and Proficiency. The for schools exams are very similar to the regular ones, but the topics and themes are designed for students in their teens. This means they won't get asked questions about employment or buying houses or anything else they have no experience in. And aside from a couple of other very minor differences, they follow the same format as the regular exams. The full schools exams are generally offered by Cambridge to the schools directly, but you can do them independently as well. You'll notice there are no for schools versions of the Advanced and Proficiency. I guess this is because they don't expect many teenage students to have such a high level, and those that do can handle the topics aimed at adults. I've found this is mostly true. A few of my students aged 15 to 16 have had the ability to go for the advanced exam. While some of it was a bit tricky to deal with, they had the maturity to handle it. In the middle of this column, we have the B2 First exam. This is the most popular. Getting a B2 qualification opens a lot of doors to employment and is within reach of many students. Below, the Preliminary and Key don't hold much value in the workplace. Some institutions and universities may only require a B1 level of English, but having an A2 Key qualification doesn't mean much. That's not to say they're useless. They can be good for building confidence, and some bilingual high schools require an A2 or a B1 to enter. Looking upwards, the C1 Advanced exam is another major test. Getting this qualification means you can work as an English teacher in schools in many countries and may be required for jobs that use a lot of English. However, it is hard. Most students who can even consider going for this exam have either lived for some time in an English-speaking country or integrate English into their daily life, watching TV in English, reading the news in English, or speaking regularly with native English speakers. You can't really prepare for it out of a grammar textbook. It's more real-world English. And finally, there's the C2 Proficiency exam. For the vast majority of people, this is completely unnecessary. Very few jobs require it. And as you'd expect, it's mighty difficult. I'm pretty sure there are quite a few native English speakers who wouldn't pass. So which is best for your students? Well, unless they have a business requirement, you're looking at one of the 2 main streams. If they're under 16, they should definitely go for the for schools version of the exam, unless they're doing advanced, in which case they can't. And even if they're 17 or 18, it might be a good idea for them to do for schools. Everyone else should do the mainstream. Of course, there are other external factors. They might need to do the IELTS or the TOEFL or another exam completely because they need to get entry into a particular country. The Cambridge exams are for getting a qualification of proficiency. I'm assuming that if you're still watching this video, then your students are definitely doing a Cambridge exam and not one of the other ones. Which brings me to a massive point. What do they need the certificate for? What are their goals? Do they need a qualification for a job or a university place? Are they just doing the qualification now, expecting to need it in the future? Or are they just doing it for a sense of personal achievement? You may be teaching in a school where taking the exam is compulsory, and they might not be too motivated. Finding out their personal goals and external requirements narrows down the field of what you need to aim for. But you should also account for their current ability level. If they're at a B1 level now and they need to get a C1 certificate, that's a massive step up. Are they ready for that? Can they handle it? Or is it worth doing a B2 exam first? Or they might have a really high level and you can push them beyond what's required of them. You can only really make this judgment when you know what their ability level is. And for that we need to do some kinds of level test. And we want to do this early on. There are a few different ways you can do this. Online you can get a bunch of different level tests that focus on grammar and reading skills. These are a good place to start. In fact, Cambridge has one of its own, which I'll link in the description. You could also give them some questions from the Cambridge exams themselves. You can download some sample papers, give them to your students and see how they get on. Definitely don't limit it to just grammar and reading. You need to get them to do a writing for you. This could be a Cambridge-style writing or just a general one. It's a great way of seeing how they construct phrases, what their language production skills are like, rather than just answering multiple choice questions. And don't underestimate the power of having a conversation with them. Pay attention to their speaking skills. Do they struggle just to make a sentence? How many grammar errors do they make? Do they speak with confidence and fluency, interacting with you and creating a conversation, or do they just say the bare minimum and not give any extra information? You can't do a proper level test with only one source of data, so combine these different things: the speaking, the writing, the reading, the grammar, and even some listening if you can. And if you're just starting out as an ESL teacher and you've never done a level test before, don't stress too much. It's not really an exact science, it's more of interpretation. As you get further into your career with more teaching experience, you can kind of figure it out pretty quickly. But until then, you can check out the CEFR descriptions of each level and kind of interpret which ones your students are at. Down below I'll link to the website with those descriptions. And don't stress too much. You can never really know exactly where someone is, you just want to get a ballpark idea. And don't think that if their current level isn't the level of the exam that they can't do that exam. They have time to improve, and that's your job. If you see them as a B1 level now, they could definitely work towards a B2. As long as they're not going to take the exam in the very imminent future, you have time to build up to it. Of course, if they're B1 now and want to do a C1 test in 3 months and they don't have much time to practice and don't have any independent study time, it's going to be very difficult. But if you have a year of regular classes, maybe even every day, and they're willing to put in a lot of self-study time, then there's no reason why you can't aim for it. What we've done here is a needs analysis. We've taken into account the requirements, either self-imposed or externally, their current ability, and how much time and effort they're willing to commit. You should discuss these 3 things with your students and come to an agreement on which exam is best for them. If you're teaching a group, you might have some students who are best for one exam and other students who are best for another exam. And that's okay, you can work with that. The exams are generally similar enough that you can do the same kind of activities and it will prepare them suitably. If you're a school teacher, you should be the one who has the final decision on which exam the students do. Obviously, you should take into account the opinion of the students and their parents if they're reasonable, but you're in the best place to make that decision. However, when you're teaching adults or in private classes, then those students are paying you and they're going to pay for the exam. Ultimately, they will have the final decision. Of course, you should advise them and give your strong recommendations, but if they really want to go for that really difficult exam that they're nowhere near getting, you can't really do much about that. Just remember, in all cases, open communication and respectful discussion is the way to approach any disagreements with students or their parents. And once you've determined which exam to go for, then it's time to look at what resources you have available. The first port of call is the Cambridge English website. It's quite well laid out and you can find loads of helpful stuff here. You get to see the format of the exam, some practice tests, and some guidance for students and teachers. Here we have the B2 first page, but all of them are basically the same. There's some introductory things and advertising, but really we want to go to exam format first. You can download the sample tests for each of the writing, listening, speaking, and reading and use of English parts, and find out what each individual question type involves. But even better, if we go to preparation, there are loads of resources. Here are some things for the exam in general, and below for teachers. Number 1 priority is the handbook for teachers. This is the most important document for you because it breaks down everything in the exam and gives advice and guidance throughout. It is your Bible. Plus it has practice exam questions and really usefully mark schemes for writing and speaking. In later videos I'll go over how to mark these parts, but a lot of it comes from this document. I highly recommend you read through the overview at the start, then get stuck into the individual parts when you come to teaching them. There are a bunch of other resources too. You can download about 20 lesson plans. I don't particularly like these because they're a bit dull and spend too much time teaching exam format rather than language and skills. But you can take the good bits and develop your own lessons. And don't worry, I'll have videos on how you can plan exam practice sessions later in this series. Next are a few guides to teaching particular skills and assessing writing. This last one is very useful as it breaks down the rubric and gives some activities your students can do. There are some other things you can look at, but those are the main ones. And they're all free. But if you need more, you can get your hands on one of the Cambridge books. There are two types you should consider. The first is a book of practice exams, and the other is a textbook that prepares language and skills. The practice exam books are brilliant. Here's my B2 first one. It contains 6 practice exams, which are super useful. The first 2 tests come with additional activities and supporting advice, while the other 4 are just straight up questions. What I really like is that it comes with lots of images for the speaking part in the back, and you can download the audio files for listening practice using a code that comes with the book. And of course there are answers to all the questions in the back. I have the C1 practice book as well, and it's just as great. You can get them for any level and they're really useful. They're called the First Trainer and Advanced Trainer, or whatever the name of the exam is, plus Trainer. Just make sure to get the updated versions, otherwise the questions will be for an older form of the test. Then there are the textbooks. These are great if you're teaching a group class, like in a school. You can use them as the basis of your whole curriculum and know that students are developing the right skills and language for the specific exam. There are a bunch of these, and anything with the Cambridge logo on is going to be a good option. But if you don't want to delve through all of them, I'd go with the complete First Student's book if it's available. With small groups and individuals though, I tend not to use the textbook. Instead, I give them customized activities that are specific to their needs. And a lot of the time I just go through all the practice papers with them. It's the best way to practice that type of question. So if you only want to get one book, I recommend going with the practice tests book. Next in this series, I'm going to be making 3 videos going over the structure and general overview of 3 of the most important tests: the preliminary, the first, and the advanced. Each will come out in the next few weeks, so make sure you're subscribed and ring the notification bell so you get updates on them. Or if you're watching in the future, they're probably already made. After that, we'll be doing a deep dive with each part of the exam getting its own video. So one on the writing, one on the reading and use of English, one on the listening, one on the speaking, for all of the exams. And I'll share all of my strategies and tricks and how you can get your students to pass. If you're preparing students for the B2 first, watch the overview video straight away. It's right here. But for now, I've been Will from Enchanted ESL, wishing you all the joy and success in your teaching. See ya!